Once upon a time, in a small coastal village, there lived a humble fisherman named Hans. His days were spent on the shimmering sea, casting his net into the waves, hoping for a bountiful catch. His wife, Greta, was a woman of simple tastes, but as time passed, a yearning for more began to stir within her. They lived in a modest cottage, with creaky wooden floors and a thatched roof that swayed gently in the coastal breeze. The couple had little, but they were content. Until one fateful day changed everything. One morning, as Hans set out to sea, he felt a tug on his net unlike any he had experienced before. With great effort, he pulled in his catch, only to discover a magnificent fish shimmering in the sunlight. Its scales sparkled like precious jewels, and its eyes held an intelligence that was almost human. "Please, kind fisherman," the fish implored, "let me go, and I will grant you a wish." Hans, taken aback by the talking fish, hesitated. He had never been one to desire much beyond what he needed to survive. But as he thought of Greta, who had often expressed her longing for a better life, he made a decision. "I wish for a better home for my wife," he said, his heart full of hope. When he returned to the cottage, he found it transformed. Their humble abode had become a charming house, complete with a garden bursting with flowers and vegetables. Greta was overjoyed, and for a time, they lived happily in their new home. Yet, as the days turned into weeks, Greta's contentment began to wane. She gazed out at the village and saw the grand houses of wealthier families, their lavish lifestyles, and their endless possessions. A seed of discontent took root in her heart. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Greta turned to Hans. "Why should we settle for this? We could have so much more. You should go back to the fish and ask for a grander wish." Hans felt a flutter of unease in his stomach, but he loved Greta and wanted to see her happy. So he agreed to her request. The next day, he returned to the sea, calling out to the fish. When it appeared, he hesitated, remembering the joy of their new home. But Greta's words echoed in his mind, urging him to ask for more. "I wish for a grand castle," he finally said, his voice trembling with uncertainty. Once again, the fish granted his wish. When Hans returned, he found a magnificent castle standing where their cottage once was. It was adorned with golden spires and filled with luxurious furnishings. Greta was ecstatic, and for a moment they reveled in their newfound wealth. Yet as the days passed, Greta's desire only grew. She wanted servants, fine clothes, and extravagant banquets. The castle felt empty without the trappings of true nobility. "Go back to the fish," she insisted, her eyes gleaming with ambition. "Tell it we want to be the richest in the land." Hans felt a chill run down his spine, but he couldn't deny Greta's fervor. Reluctantly, he returned to the sea once more. The fish awaited him, its eyes reflecting both wisdom and weariness. "What do you desire now, fisherman?" it asked. "I wish to be the richest in the land," Hans said, his voice barely above a whisper. The fish nodded, and with a wave of its fin, Hans was transported back to the castle, now transformed into a sprawling estate surrounded by gardens and gold. They had everything they could ever want, except for one thing: satisfaction. Greta was not content. She wanted more power, more influence. "You must go back one last time," she urged, her voice laced with desperation. "Tell the fish that we want to be like the gods, ruling over all." Hans felt a deep sense of dread, but he could not refuse her. He returned to the sea, his heart heavy with the weight of his choices. When he called for the fish, it appeared once more, its expression grave. "What do you wish for now?" it asked, as if it already knew the answer. "I wish to be like the gods," Hans said, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. The fish nodded slowly, and in an instant, everything changed. Hans found himself standing in the ruins of their castle, the once grand estate reduced to rubble. Greta stood beside him, her face twisted in disbelief. "What have you done?" she cried, her voice echoing in the desolation. "We had everything, but we were never satisfied," Hans replied, the truth dawning upon him like a dark cloud. "We let our desires consume us. We wanted more than we needed, and now we have lost it all." As the reality of their situation sank in, they looked around at the remnants of their former life. The beauty of the castle, the wealth, and the power it was all gone. They were left with nothing but the bitter taste of regret. The fish had warned them, but they had chosen to ignore its wisdom, driven by the insatiable hunger for more. In the days that followed, Hans and Greta returned to their humble life by the sea. They rebuilt their modest cottage, but the scars of their greed lingered in their hearts. They learned to appreciate the simple joys of life, the sound of the waves, the warmth of the sun, and the beauty of the world around them. Hans returned to fishing, and Greta began to find fulfillment in the small things she had once overlooked. Though they never regained the wealth they had briefly tasted, they discovered something far more valuable: contentment. They realized that true happiness did not stem from riches or power, but from the love they shared and the life they built together. The lessons of greed and the consequences of uncontrolled desires had shaped them, and in their newfound simplicity, they found a profound sense of peace. As they stood together on the shore, watching the sun dip below the horizon, they knew they had been given a second chance. The sea whispered its secrets, and the winds carried their laughter. A reminder that sometimes less truly is more.